Hey everybody, Pete A. Turner, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show. Our guest today is a return guest and a friend, Joe Musselman, who started the Honor Foundation, which was an organization that helps special operators transition into their next life, their business life, find themselves, make a path, and execute on that path. Pretty cool. We've talked about that in the past, and everybody should go check out that episode with Joe. Today, we're talking about his newest thing called Fathom Venture Capital, where they invest in people, TLC, teams, leadership, and culture. And that's right up my alley. That means we're talking about affect over effect. And that's where Joe and his team go out with other venture capitalists and say, let us take this aspect, the TLC part, and let's invest time and effort here on this endeavor to take this startup to the next level. I mean, think about someone who's young, graduates from Stanford. They literally never led a company before. They're in their early 20s. You get them that knowledge, that specific training to become great leaders, and all of a sudden you've bet on a company that's a lot better positioned to succeed. All right, so that's Joe Musselman and what we're doing with him today. By the way, recording this episode in New York City. It's noisy. There are sirens. There are people honking the horns. There are airplanes flying overhead, and there are birds chirping. So if you don't hear that stuff, that's the power of the Bulletproof podcast rig, a Zoom H6, and my Shure SM35 microphones. You guys should definitely check that out. Not endorsement. Not a paid endorsement, just an actual endorsement from me trying to help you guys out. Hey, support the show. Go to breakitdownshow.com, subscribe, click, rate, review, buy the shirts, do all those things. And the last thing that I always close with is Save the Brave, savethebrave.org. Go to the donate tab, put a small amount of money in each month, and you'll be doing a lot to help us help veterans with PTSD. If you guys are already on board and already doing these things, let me stop right now and say thank you. I see you and I appreciate it. There are so many of you out there supporting the show. Joe's good people. You're going to love this episode. Here comes Joe Musselman.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Morata.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Dr. Will Riley of the Kentucky State University. You're listening to the Break It Down show, as always, with Pete Turner.
Hey everyone, this is Joe Musselman, and you're listening to the Break It Down show.
The last time I was here, we were here with Scott, and we kind of covered like the basics of who you are, what you do, the charity that you started that's now like running on its own power, which is already, by the way, any exit, even if it's a charity exit, is great. Like you've got these guys going and doing things. It's remarkable. But when we were connected by Greg Hurwitz, who's a famous Hollywood Hills writer, he just wrote a book. He's on his book tour now. You guys should check out Orphan X. But he connected us, I think in his head, partly because of our veteran connection and our passion for those things. Maybe he knew a little bit about the other stuff, but what made us vibe was our human connection.
100%.
And I'll say this, and this drives people crazy, but it's still true. Affect is greater than effect. And if I can create an affect in you that I desire, even if I create the wrong affect, at least I'm focusing there instead of, I can mail you 15 letters. I can, stand in front of your house and I just want to say hi to you. It doesn't work that way. Like you have to create that affect. So that's what I really think is where we locked in and went, okay, there's more conversations to be had.
Yep. And at that time, I don't think Greg even knew the kind of the purpose of the venture fund, which is all centered on affect of team leadership and culture. So when we started talking about that, what's interesting is a veteran community, it's like the biggest fraternity and sorority in the world. It's like that's the immediate connection. Like, oh, you were in the Army? I was in the Navy.
I know someone in the Navy.
Right, exactly. Like, oh, do you know Bob Smith? Of course I know Bob Smith. Like everyone knew Bob Smith. But the next level stuff is it typically does in fact go, oh, you were a veteran, great. You get through the pleasantries and the courtesies of where'd you serve, where'd you deploy, where'd you do this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And then you go to like, oh, so what's next? What are you doing now?
Yeah.
Then it's always so exciting to hear what comes out of every veteran's mouth because they're usually continuing their service in a different way in the world, doing extraordinary things. And that's when we connected.
Yeah.
It was very similar about talking about your experience and getting it for, working to get information, affect over effect. How do I find the X? You told me something I'll never forget. You find the bomb by looking everywhere else for it to find it.
Yeah.
Right. When you said that made total sense to me, that when you want to pull something out of someone, no matter what that is, because I was talking to you about all the interviews I've done with startup founders and venture capitalists up in Silicon Valley, and I was trying to pull out the real raw material behind what makes great teams in startup environments, how do you sharpen leadership skills, and how do you begin to quantify something like culture. And you told me to ask everything else around that. And I did. And I got to the core. So it was funny.
Yeah, with that, I mean, that's exactly right, though. And there's certain hallmark questions I'll ask in certain situations that I built over time. And like one of them is when I walk into a two shop, for the audience, two shop is the intel shop. That's where, they try to get the picture of the combat zone. And I'll go see the boss there, whether it's a captain, a colonel, a major, whoever it is, and I'll say, "How good is the resolution on your battlefield right now?" And then if they say anything north of 60%, I now know how to approach them.
Right.
Way differently.
Yeah,
because
totally.
they're not correct.
Totally,
And now I have to slow down, back up. But if they say, I don't know anything, I'm like,
Right.
is it better than 50%? And they're like, yeah, maybe. And I'm like, okay.
Okay, so you're about 30.
Yeah, okay. So that's good though. I mean, that sets they don't know enough and they're curious about
Right.
that. And now I know directly how to go. Now I know I can go direct. I don't have to keep going tangential. The other example I thought of was just the other day, a scientist took a picture of the surface of the sun for the first time ever.
Wow.
Yeah, and he took a camera and pointed it directly at the sun. But when you realize it took hundreds of years to develop this technology, and you're not doing it directly, you're going through a medium that allows you to see this incredible thing, and now you have all the questions like, there it is, why is it like this? And it's so that's how I think I like to approach people is, don't come straight for the thing I want, because it turned out maybe you can't even deliver that, but the thing you can deliver is the thing I actually need.
That's right.
Yeah.
100%. Totally. So it's been fun the last couple of months, and since we last talked, there's been tons of personal and professional kind of milestones hit. So I'm excited to share and
Well, tell us what the venture fund is.
Yeah, sure. So maybe a quick 80,000 foot overview of the origin story and where it came from and how it was developed, because it is absolutely linked to honor.org and the work that I did with veterans from the special operations community, and it's actually inextricably linked. So I think that's important to know. So just a flashback to 2012, 2013, I interviewed hundreds of Navy SEALs and special operators all over the country, and I kept asking them, 250 to be exact, and I asked them all the same 33 questions. And these were all folks that have already transitioned out of their service. And I kept hearing the same thing over and over and over again when they were transitioning into their new role. This was fresh, 2 to 3 years out. So for the vets listening, 2 to 3 years out from service, you're especially doing 10, 15, 20 years, especially the 20 plus year folks, that is still a very raw time, 2 to 3 years out of service. And I kept hearing the same thing, and it was only until I revisited my notes that I start to notice a golden thread that was connecting all these stories. And it came down to one philosophy, but 3 things. I kept hearing, tell me about your transition, what's going on, and, man, I just want to be part of a great team. The next thing was, I want to work for a great leader, one that knows how to lead and one that knows how to follow. And then lastly, I just want to help create a culture. I want to be a part of a great culture.
Yeah.
Over and over again. Every interview that I went back and read, the team, the leadership, and the culture was mentioned every single time.
Yeah.
So it just by coincidence that I go back and revisit these things as I was thinking about my own transition post the Honor Foundation. I've been helping others transition, but I've never once thought of my own transition and what the hell I was going to do. I've
Typical, yeah.
thought of literally helped thousands of operators just think about it, walk through ideas, like the classic hashtag what's next. Like I wanted to walk them through that in a seamless way. And when I went back to visit those notes, I said, my gosh, TLC, interesting.
Yeah.
Teams, leadership, and culture. So I threw that up on a whiteboard, and I'll never forget it. It was up there, and it said teams, leadership, and culture, and that's all it was. I knew where it stemmed from, but I just wanted to think about that for a second. Then I had been inspired by some great venture capitalists, literally some of the greatest investors in the world, have been donors to our cause. And I was mentored by them. I admired the way they approached the business. And then I started to notice and go back and listen to their talks that they were giving at TechCrunch, at TED campuses all over the world, at the World Economic Forum, at Ideas Festival, at you name the major conference, and all of these investors had been speaking there. And it was the most amazing thing. Guess what one philosophy kept being brought up, and what three things kept being revisited? Teams, leadership, and culture.
Oh, I was going to guess micromanagement.
Yeah. No, tell me about it. No, but see, that's also interesting. Like, those folks, they truly don't believe in that. The best ones don't believe in that. These are all Forbes, Midas Touch, top investors on planet Earth.
Yeah.
And it's not an accident. Like, becoming a millionaire these days, like, you can invent like a pet rock or something, and you're a millionaire. Like, and I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not downplaying the hustle that goes into even productizing a rock. Like, I'm not saying that. But to become a multi-billionaire, there's some eloquent sophistication and design behind that.
Yeah.
But then I started to notice, okay, I interviewed all these operators. They kept telling me the same thing that they hoped they would work for, which was teams, leadership, and culture. Now I'm looking at all of these VCs, top VCs in the world, and they keep talking about what makes a great startup.
Right.
Teams, leadership, and culture. Then I noticed that the majority of operators, the only consistent thing we had with placement at honor.org was about a third of our graduates went into starting up technology companies. And I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Gritty, garage, 10 people trying to change the world. Everything is new every day. Right?
Yeah.
It's frenetic. It's chaotic, just like, an operator's career.
Yeah.
So they thrive in those environments. So then I thought, okay, so I've got this subset of talent that keeps looking for the same thing. I have this subsection of venture capitalists that keep saying the same thing. But what about the entrepreneurs? And when I say what about the entrepreneurs, like when I sit down with a founder, what are they thinking about? What aren't they thinking about? And most importantly, let's see if I can use Pete's method.
Yeah.
And this is all I did last year. All 2019 was interviewing 50 startup founders between the A and B round of funding, and then 50 VCs who fund between the A and B round funding.
Yeah.
I asked them a set of 30, same process for creating THF.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't broke because it's a design thinking process.
Sure.
The first step in design thinking is to empathize with the community you mean to serve.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So boom. Step one, I want to go talk to founders. Found 50 founders, went and talked to every single one of them, asked the same subset of questions. VCs, found the best VCs, interviewed all 50 of them, asked them the same subset of questions, and guess what? One of the main questions for the entrepreneurs was, what do you wish your VC would stop doing and start doing more of?
Yeah.
That was one of the questions. And immediately it was like they would look around the room and kind of look around and make sure that somehow the VC wasn't listening, right? And at the same time, their response was almost unanimous in the thread that I found, which was, I am 22.
Mm-hmm.
I have never built a team in my life.
Right.
I'm 22. I have never led anything. I just left Stanford, Harvard, quit in some cases to build this next big great thing, right? I don't know how to lead. And they would lean in and the body language would change because they were embarrassed a little bit. They were vulnerable, that they don't know how to build a team, right? And I'm being thrown all this talent. And by the way, some of these people are twice my age and they have 10 times more of my experience. How am I supposed to lead them?
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And culture, everyone keeps telling me that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
Right? What the F does that mean? What does that mean? Really, what does that mean?
Yeah.
How do we quantify that?
Yeah.
And I kept hearing variations of the same things. I wish that my VC, it's almost like the founder is posturing up to their board. They don't want to ask dumb questions all the time. And they're posturing down into an organization.
Yeah.
And that leaves them very lonely in the middle. And I thought, okay, my God, I'm feeling, I get you, I got you. I feel what you're putting out. Now let me turn to the VC community and say, okay, the same thing was, what do you wish your entrepreneurs would start doing? Right. And stop doing and start doing more of. Same question, but reverse optic. And they said something like, I just wish I could get them to be better leaders. I want them to be great leaders for the organization. And there was the same thing. Like his or her team, they need to bring in better people, right? And then the culture, like, oh, the culture's horrible there. Like, we don't know, how we're going to be able to work with them because the culture's kind of taking a random turn. So there's this huge disconnect. Huge.
Yeah.
And there was an inspiration from one of our co-investors. His name is Joe Lonsdale. He's the founder of Palantir. He's the founder of Adapar, and now he founded Formation 8, one of his first funds. Now he founded 8VC, and they are a co-investor with Fathom Venture Capital, my fund. And Joe wrote an article in 2014, 2015, and I'll never forget the title. It was called "There's a Deficit of Leadership in Silicon Valley." And Joe, remarkable, brilliant, by any human standard of brilliance. I look up to him. He's a mentor of mine, a friend. And when I read that article, I reached out and I wanted him to speak to the operations community immediately. I was like, they need to hear this because this is a community of leaders who need help translating that. What is my value here and how does it translate here? And Joe got it. He nailed it in the article. He thinks very philosophically about things. Him and I talk about Stoic philosophy often, and this is something the community is very good at doing. So now I have this optic, which is the startup founder is actually craving for more support on the soft skills.
Yeah.
Like, how do you form a team? And what does that mean from an environment standpoint and a look, taste, smell, feel? Like, what does a great team feel like?
Yes.
I have no scar tissue to pull from to understand that. Leadership. I'm 25. I'm 26. I just left here. I quit Intel. I left Apple. I started this thing. I don't know. I don't know what great leader. And a lot of times they start businesses and they found organizations because, like, no one leaves a job. They leave their boss.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
So they're leaving leadership that they didn't agree with. But how do I do the opposite of that? And how do I implement it? And a culture, like, everyone thinks culture is like a petri dish that no one can figure out what it is, but when in fact it can be quantified. So I would say that these things eventually led me to break down all of the data that I had from both sides of the field. Okay, I just listened to 50 entrepreneurs. I just listened to 50 of the top VCs on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Total net worth among these VCs was over $50 billion. Okay?
Yeah.
So we're talking that is not a pool of wealth to scoff at.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a reason why the money followed their thinking. And it's because they actually valued all the things that we're talking about, the team's leadership and culture, and they knew how to intuitively invest in that. If you meet with the best investor, one, I'll never forget, told me that, there's still no quantifiable way that tells me that this is a great deal and a great company. I think to myself, and this is a quote that gives me chills every time I say it, when I look at the entrepreneur and I think to myself that if they can pull this off, that would be magic.
Yeah.
Literally magic. And if I get that feeling, I want to know more. I want to dig in. I'll do the due diligence. But, like, if I don't get that feeling from just the market and the impact and what this person plans to do in the world, if I don't get that feeling, it's a pass for me.
Yeah.
And that's why I love venture. It's very much a performance art.
So it starts with an affect. I mean, that's what he wants. He wants to create that affect in me of magic.
That's right. 100%. And when I think about when he said that, I'll just never forget when he said that, because it gave me goosebumps that this top VC in the world is talking about something that's magical. And he talked about an affect. He talked about a feeling. And then the diligence will happen, right?
Yeah.
They'll give it to the quants and the analysts and they'll look at the deal. But first, the magic has to be there.
Yeah.
And to me, I was raised in a Fantasia household where all we did was watch Disney and laugh and play and imagine. It was all based on how things made us think and feel. And our thoughts guided our feelings, and our feelings kind of guided our thought process and how we wanted to approach people. And I'm an optimist. The alternative is not for me, but I am. And they all shared that exact same attitude of the world and vision of the world. And to me, that is where I want to live with our portfolio of companies, with our partners. I want to work with people that think, act, feel, and communicate very similarly. and have that viewpoint on the world that yes, we need balance in our teams, but the way to look at the world to me is no other way. And I want to be around entrepreneurs that are doing the same thing.
Let's talk about culture, because
yes,
oftentimes we'll hear people talk about EQ and emotional intelligence.
Sure.
Absolutely, you have to have it, but you never hear like someone say, "What about CQ, cultural acuity?"
Yeah,
and building and this that petri dish. Yeah, petri dish you leave alone passively and it does something, or it doesn't.
Yes,
that's
a great analogy. So you just took the petri analogy dish and made it even better.
Yeah.
Because we're speaking the same language, man. That's right.
Yeah.
If you leave it, something happens.
Yeah.
If you mess with it, something happens.
Yeah.
Either way, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
So for me, I'd rather be a part of shaping the culture. And so I'm excited to share something with you. So,
all right.
So taking all the data and conversations and everything from the 50 entrepreneurs, taking all the data and the conversations from the venture capital community, it really comes down to 5 forces which create a culture.
All right. Oh, let's hear this.
5 forces.
Wait, hold on. I want to record this. Okay. This is good.
I mean, this is really important. And
okay.
I've taken the time.
Back up and start leading to the 5 things that build a culture.
Sure. So there are, after all of the interviews and research of the 50 entrepreneurs and the 50 leading venture capitalists in the world, culture creation comes down to 5, what I call the 5 guiding forces of a business. And everyone's going to hear this and think like, okay, we know all this, but not necessarily. It's the small tweaks, and then how I will explain it that will make a lot of sense. Vision, mission, core values, guiding principles, and an ethos create a culture.
Okay.
And what I realize is there's 2 problem sets that have to be solved in order to get great TLC.
Okay. Teams,
leadership, and culture. So the first problem set is if the individual founder does not have a clear, his or her own 5 guiding forces clear within themselves. Like for me, my personally, not my company, my vision is very simple. And you have to start off a vision statement with, I envision a world where I, Joe Musselman, envision a world where people feel psychologically safe and compensated going to a job that they love.
Okay.
That is the world that I hope to see. We'll never get there.
Yeah.
That's the point. It's something over there that no matter what I do, when I put my feet on the ground in the morning, I want to be working towards that vision. How do I get to that vision? It's through my mission. My mission in this world is to light fires so others may see. I used to have can, but then I realized I cannot make people see anything. They have to want to see it. So others may see. To light fires so others may see. That feeds into my vision of creating a world that I envision where people feel psychologically safe and compensated going to a job that they love. That's the mission statement that gets me to my vision.
Yeah.
I have to have a set of actions, a set of verbs, of values, right? That's what values are. They're verbs. Core values lead into a mission statement that achieve the vision. My core values, for example, be you. Socrates, know thyself. That's the hardest thing for people to do, is to know thyself. Next one, create experiences. When people interact with me, I want to create an experience for them, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter whether I barely know you, kind of know you, just met you in the store. My wife, who's sitting over there, she jokes like, okay, no lollygagging, right? Because she knows I'm going to talk to everyone in like Walgreens.
Yeah.
Because I'm constantly looking to just talk to people. I love people. Another value is practicing artistry, right? And notice these are all verbs. Create experiences.
Right.
Be you, right? You have to have verbs to be values. Now, practice artistry is a sliding scale. We wake up some days, man, today I just felt in the zone. Yeah. Right? And then there's other days where I was like, oh, I was so lazy today. Like I didn't do anything. Productivity at a 3 out of 10. I didn't practice artistry today. That's okay, Joe, because tomorrow, let's do it again. Right? So and I have 8 core values, right?
Right.
Now, the core values are verbs. They are verbs which will guide my behavior into my mission. My mission is to light fires so others may see. All my 8 core values are verbs that guide me into my mission, that guide me into achieving the vision that I hope to see in the world. Guiding principles are the what's, the things that I do on a daily basis to help me make decisions in the moment. So for instance, a guiding principle of mine is no relationship can change without contact. None. So if I'm thinking to myself, why hasn't this person gotten back to me?
Yes.
Hold on, let's review. How much contact have I made?
Yeah.
Have I only sent an email? Well, no wonder why. That's like 1 out of 10 ways to make contact, right? Have I written a note? Have I called them? Have I been to their house? Have I sent a meaningful gift for them to think that even talking to me is worth it, right? So like when we think of, and by the way, I have dozens and dozens of guiding principles, and those guiding principles, they inform the what I do right now today. Right now in this moment, I'm going to make a decision based off of my what I should do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to feed those into a set of guiding values, of values that will basically inform the actions that I take into my mission that will bring the vision I hope to see into the world, right?
Yeah.
The last one is an ethos. How many times have you gone to an About Us page of a company and like you just start to fall asleep? It's like, and it always begins with like in 1912 something happened, and then something else happened in 1920, and then we built this thing in 1945, and now we're known in 1999, and now it's 2020, and look at our growth and all, blah 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 blah. Like if you look at the warrior ethos of Sparta, if you look at the great Greeks and Romans, they all had ethoses. They all great societies had an ethos on what it meant to be a part of that culture, right? And all of these things, they have to work in this kind of recycling, cyclical way where you're constantly going through your day, what I call alignment up, down, and all around. Meaning, when I wake up in the morning, I'm working towards my vision. My mission is going to be this. My core values today are going to guide my actions. My guiding principles are going to help me make decisions. And ethos is basically made up of my subconscious items and words that I hope to bring about in the world. Now, if you could picture an iceberg, I've drawn this out for the fund. And if you can picture an iceberg, the vision is the flagpole on top. The whole world sees the vision, right? Then you have the mission, which is the next layer down right above the water. This is what the world sees, the vision statement, the mission statement, right? Now, the funny thing is, the more founders that I met with, their vision statement was great. Their mission statement was beautiful. The moment I went beneath the surface and I started to talk to their management team, I started to talk to their employees down to the janitor that cleaned the waste baskets at night and asked them, so, hey, simple question, right? I would ask the following questions. Hey, tell me about the teams here. Tell me about the leadership.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
Tell me about the leadership. Tell me about the culture. Then it opened a big can of worms.
Well, okay, so I have bought many of these cans of worms and opened them for the military because they don't even know they have the can.
That's right. Yeah.
And
that's right.
You know, it's the same thing where you have theory, strategy, and they're all subordinate, right? And they go on down to operational level, tactical level, and then boots on the ground. But there's a level below that. That's ground truth. So, okay, and let me see if I can explain this. I'm positive you'll get it, but just for the audience. So when you put boots on the ground, it doesn't mean that they're good at their job. You take someone who's an artilleryman and an admin clerk, and you're like, you're now going to go engage Afghan police and teach them how to be good at being the police, which is literally a thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know, and so these are all conversationally driven businesses. You know, this enterprise of advising. Okay, great. Well, who's taught you how to have a conversation in a way that advise someone well, and how to use culture to your advantage, and how to blend your culture with their? Who's taught you how to do that? Well, nobody. But I have gotten a go at all tables at NTC when I was firing my long gun, you know. So like, yeah, we can load in 30 seconds and all these, you know, our trigonometry is all great. We work the computer great. Okay, but now go sit in front of your partner who is cross-language, cross-cultural, cross everything, cross purposes, and pull that out. And that's that lower part of the iceberg. And that's what matters. If you can't find a mini strategic win on the ground where I go and I look, then those boots on the ground, and it's not a lack of intention.
Yeah.
It's not a lack of capacity. They have the capacity to do this. It's not institutionally been created within them.
Right.
So all of these things are part of that can of worms that are all under the iceberg, because you cannot win. You cannot make that flag. You can say the flag's red, but I'm like, I don't even see a flag.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah. By the way, I'm colorblind.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm colorblind.
Exactly.
Being empowered to see something, the person who you empower to see that may see, they may see something that you don't agree with,
Yep.
but it's their thing.
That's right. It must be theirs.
Right. It must be. It must be there. So the whole idea of that work at the lower levels, if you can't repeatedly advance the strategic goal, and the ground level, and you know this, especially in combat zones, it's forward and back, mistake, success, mistake, success, mistake, big mistake. And it's all born in these mistakes that you slowly go, I don't know anything. And I heard the best line the other day from Colonel John McKay. We were talking about partnering.
Wow.
I'm going to do a whole series of shows for the SFABs, the Security Forces Advisory Brigades. For the Army.
Wow.
And they're trying to learn how to do all these things. They
Yeah,
actually should
sure.
listen to this show. And he said, and this guy's done all of it.
I can only imagine. Sure.
All of it. And he said, first and foremost, you must be humble.
Oh, no question. So no question. One thing about Fathom Ventures is we talk about something often that whenever we talk about capital, we call it servant capital. Like every dollar that we give out to entrepreneurs, they need to know that there's an element of service behind that. There's a purity to VC, and that's what I want our fund to reinvigorate throughout Silicon Valley, which is the venture space has changed significantly in the last 20 years. It's actually grown 60,000% from when it was launched in 1980 and 1990, just from a dollar perspective and growth. There was $700 million in venture capital in 1980, 1990, and then it grew 60,000%. Like there's billions and billions and billions and billions of now dollars inside of venture capital.
Yeah.
And with that growth, imagine if you took a special operations unit, and over 20 years it grew 60,000%.
Boy,
do you think that the teams would be different, the leadership would be different, and the culture would be different? You would lose something.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel, that through this rapid growth and scale and the expectation of entrepreneurs to raise more money faster, quicker, deploy things bigger, better out into the world, there's a real detriment to the founder. There's a real detriment to the VC from an investor standpoint, which is why VC is moving later and later and later stage. It's harder for people to get into early stage companies now. So it's really changed. And so we just want to take a step back and say to our co-investors, who are some of the biggest and best funds in the world, and say, we would like to work with your top companies. And we want to focus on serving capital. We want to focus on helping them build great teams. We want to sharpen their leadership skill sets, and we want to help them build a culture from the earliest days possible. Back to the 50 entrepreneurs that I interviewed, one thing they would always say when I talked about these 5 forces, unanimous response.
Right.
I don't know when I'm going to do that. I don't have time for that.
Right.
I don't have time, man. We've got this coming up and that coming up and a product launch. We got to hire people. I don't have time for that. And
Thus, a niche is identified.
Look, my immediate response is, if you don't have time for it now to do it right, when are you ever going to have time for it later?
Right.
And then I show them the quantifiable response of, when you don't build a good management team from the earliest days, here's the money cost, right? It's nearly $500,000 to let go of 2 people within 6 months, right? Like, you're wasting your money, you're wasting venture capital money.
Yep.
Like, we have to take the time to understand what types of teams. They don't even have definitions for TLC.
Right.
Meaning, like, hey, how do you define the teams here? How do you define your particular leadership style? Like, hey, how would you define the culture here at your organization? Right? So if they're not clear about where they're going, how is the organization also going to be clear to follow them?
Yeah.
And that is why the background of military and special operations and working with that community, they put their feet on the ground every morning. They knew exactly what the vision, the mission, the core values, although they, in some cases they are stated, but a lot of it is subconsciously known throughout the community. Like, you have to, when you sign, and also another reason why I wanted to go into venture capital and work specifically with entrepreneurs is I'm not comparing the two communities. I hope everyone who's listening understands that I'm not comparing signing on the dotted line to be a veteran to signing on the dotted line to be an entrepreneur. So I want to make that distinction very clear.
Okay.
Obviously, when you sign the dotted line, you are giving up your life quite literally to the needs of that organization.
Right.
And you're willing to self-sacrifice you as a human being in your life to a greater cause, that being the greatest country in the world, the United States of America. When you sign on the dotted line as an entrepreneur, if you're a true entrepreneur, you are symbolically doing something similarly, right? I'm signing on the dotted line to launch this great big thing that hopefully changes the world. And I'm giving up everything. I'm giving up potential for relationships. I'm giving up potential to be closer with my spouse, with my family, with my kids. I'm giving up everything. I'm going to be on a constant, frequent state of deploying, and I don't care because this thing must exist. That's why I want to work with entrepreneurs.
I want to jump in here and talk about that, because when you are talking about Silicon Valley in this case, and you want to start a company, you got one big factor to come over. You're some 22-year-old kid from Stanford. You've never known true adversity, and you are going to be perceived as a douchebag. Because you have all this opportunity, and there's going to be people that resent you just for who you were trying to be. And you're not even that thing yet. You're 22 years old. An enormous burden to have to come over, because that's the infrastructure of their mind. If you don't take time to understand the infrastructure of their mind, you can't go and rearrange furniture.
That's right. So I want to touch on that for one second. You just brought up a great point. So thinking of, and I'm going to be playful with what you just said, because something happened to me recently that I connected with someone in a great way. Adversity, right? I think that some entrepreneurs who are young were tested in so many different ways. And I know this isn't what you meant, but like they've experienced adversity that I've never experienced.
Right.
So like, for instance, I connected with this individual. I was at Sundance Film Festival for an event that we hosted there. And I started talking to this entrepreneur. I said, I stumped him. He said like, hey, let's talk about stuff that matters. I said, you came to the right dude. Like, let's go. Let's talk about stuff that matters. And I said, okay, opening question. I kid you not. I was like, all right, so tell me an emotionally shaping story that has either emotionally shaped you negatively or positively in your life between the ages of 0 and 10. And he was like, what? Like, okay. And he dove right in, right?
Yeah.
Turns out his mother worshipped Islam. He was a Muslim. His father was Jewish.
Yeah.
They met, married, had their son, who I was speaking to. They divorced for what might seem to be obvious reasons early in his life, before the age of 10. And then about 10 years later, he came out as gay.
Wow. Yeah.
That's adversity.
Absolutely.
And then he started a company, and we're sitting there talking about the things that matter, right? The things that, and had a dialogue, and we were completely opposite spectrums of, he now is, of course, he called himself a militant agnostic or a militant atheist. And I told him I'm a super proud Jesus-loving Christian.
Yeah.
And we hugged it out and laughed and had the greatest time and said, Joe, only if all Christians were like you, I might change to atheist.
Yeah.
Going from militant to just being, I said, hey, that's a step forward, man.
That's a step.
Like you think, you think Jesus isn't going to accept anybody into their life? Of course they are. Of course he is.
Yeah.
But we laughed and we had a great time, and we're meeting again in a couple weeks. Like, I want to work with him because of the adversity that he experiences. So unlike other people's adversity, and it's such a relative term, adversity. But I know this, that when you go to sign on a line to be a United States veteran or serve in the armed services, and you sign the dotted line to be a true entrepreneur, not those folks that are like wantrepreneurs, like, I'm going to post about starting a business, I'm going to post about being an entrepreneur. No, I'm talking about until someone relied on you for their livelihood, you are not an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like I there's a lot of entrepreneurial people.
Yeah.
But until a family is relying on you to provide for them, you are not an entrepreneur. That's just my own personal
It's a good measure.
view on that measure of being an entrepreneur.
And that measure should be hard. It's a rigorous one, because it's a rigorous field. And the other thing I was going to say about that whole spirit is, if you're not in that point, obviously that dude you were talking to has courage. He's been through adversity.
Unbelievable, yeah.
And so he's getting past the perception of him being some entitled, well-moneyed VC-backed thing, and he's becoming a real person, which is
totally. And
invaluable.
he was vulnerable with the conversation and authentic, and like all that does from I still feel like I have imposter syndrome, like calling myself a VC.
Yeah.
But like because it's so early on.
Yeah.
But I could say that from a VC perspective, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I want to be with what you're
There's magic
doing.
in that.
And then it was like, oh, and by the way, he has 2,000 employees. His business is booming, but there's no surprise there.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't even know what business it was.
Yeah.
I just was talking to the person.
Yeah.
And then I said, oh, by the way, what do you do?
Yeah.
Right. Like we're attracted to people, affect,
Yep.
people that are
Exactly.
affecting us
Yeah.
all every day.
Yeah.
And then I was just amazed of not to mention that the business he's doing is, of course, very human-centered.
Right.
And he's changing lives. And I'm not surprised because that's who he is.
Yeah.
This is a great
There's
opportunity.
congruence there.
Total. Absolutely. One thing about that's a great segue into to cap off and tie a bow on the 5 forces. He was aligned as an individual. He knew the vision of the world. Whether he wrote it down on paper, he knew it. He knew his mission. He knew core values. He knew guiding principles. He had an ethos that he was walking around on the inside with, right? So he first was aligned.
Yeah.
Then he created a company.
Yeah.
Therefore, the company, when he created it, it was also aligned. Now we can work on getting those things down on paper. So for all the veterans that are listening and for all the people in the world that are just walking around, we are all a bundle of stories that equal these 5 guiding forces.
Yes.
Until we actually sit down, and I know this because I've asked audiences this before, and I've asked people I've worked with before, that less than 1% of people are walking around every day that have ever taken, I use the analogy of 6 weeks to do a deep dive of self-authoring into themselves. Like, how many times have individuals sat down and spent 6 weeks trying to define who they are and understand themselves at a very deep level? Less than 1% from my calculations so far. So like if veterans are looking to move into their next great adventure in life, if you understand your 5 guiding forces, finding the company or the next great big thing for you is going to be so simple because it's like, remember those old school projectors with the transparent like things, like you lay your guiding principles and values down, then you lay down all of these different opportunities from companies, and if they don't align with who you are,
Love it.
you will not be happy at that organization. I will guarantee you that.
It's and as a leader, you have to develop that congruence for the people. You have to and that's how you've created this culture is to pull them through this die.
That's right.
And get them to be in that shape. And if they don't fit, you say it doesn't work here.
That's right.
Let's get you somewhere where it might work, and do that in a way that's not it's redemptive instead of rejective, because it's very easy to say you don't fit. By the way, here's the thing that drives me crazy, Joe, about businesses is like we're all about family. We're all a team here. Until we don't like you, then we hold a secret from you and chop you right there.
That's right.
And you're going home that day. So everybody fears that.
Yep.
Everybody sees it. They see, oh my God, that guy's got the cardboard box in his hand. He's walking out the door. Am I next?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to screw anything up. And they work from a position of fear to hold on to their job in your company.
That's right. That's right.
And that is so expensive.
That's
it's
right.
so expensive.
So expensive.
I wanted to add a thing about the entrepreneurial spirit too, because when you're out there trying to do this, if you want to be an entrepreneur, Sly Stone, the icon that was copied by icons by, he is so, he is an iconoclast. He makes other iconic musicians. That's how big he is. And he said, if my music's not good enough, I don't deserve to eat.
Yeah.
You're competing with that.
Yeah, that's right.
At the very best, the best entrepreneurs are like, I will be damned if I'm going to be damned by this.
That's right.
And they will work past you. So you don't have to be that way. You can go a different route, but that is part of your mindset is how do I outwork every problem in front of me so that there's no way I don't have to solve this problem today, but I did get after it and I put a dent in it.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to say too is when people pitch things, the affect over effect. I learned this from my friend Hilliard, who's a writer in Hollywood. When I pitch a project to people that pay for movies, I don't say, there you are, Zanzibar. He says, I'm a black gay kid that grew up in East East Palo Alto.
Yep.
The most dangerous city in the world when I grew up. And he tells this story about him. So they're leaning forward going, who is this guy?
Yep.
And that goes to that whole thing on, how you align yourself. So I want to bring this last little point in here, then I'm going to shut up and let you roll.
No, that's fine.
But there's a thing called, and of course it's got a ridiculous title. It's the cross-collaboration cultural matrix, or cross-cultural collaboration matrix. And you would, in theory, stack them like your slides on your overhead projector, and you would look for the collaborative behavior. So as a leader, you're looking for basically 4 values, and they might change depending on the situation. But there's 4 values. There's obviously collaboration, which is the upper quadrant that we would expect that to be. But there's also passive-aggressive, corruption, and incompetence. And when you perceive these things as the leader, as the person who's trying to initiate the change or whatever it is, you have to say, there's a problem here. And it's usually tied to, and these are tools, these are lenses, these aren't answers. It's usually tied to, you don't have an idea of, well, first off, your goals and your decision making, which was what you just illustrated, but also that person's goals and decision making, and so when you understand where they're trying to go and how they get there, boy, now you can say, okay, this is your 8 and hit the gate. I don't mind that. You're going to be here. I want to get the best from you when you're here. Is that fair? Yes, of course it's fair. Okay, let's work within that paradigm. By the way, what's after the gate?
Right.
And then you ask him, like, oh, this is your passion? Well, then let's work on these things and improve that condition of that employee, because otherwise, you're just they're not stealing money. You're letting them underperform by not being the leader you need to be. And if you took time to do that with a given percentage of your people, you would start to tamp down that fear in your organization.
Sure. Yeah, that's right. And speaking of two things, you mentioned, something that struck something to me. Behind us is a big mural of Martin Luther King. And
why did I know that?
Yeah.
I knew you were going to say that.
Did you?
We ESP'd right there, totally.
No way.
I didn't have to look. But
so there's a big mural, and the reason why that's there is because, talk about alignment. He did not start off his speech in the mall in 1960s with I have a 99-point plan. He said, I have a dream. And then he expounded on that dream for America, and people were willing to follow him. And then the plan activated itself because he was aligned from a vision, mission, core values, guiding principles, and an ethos perspective. And the world was ready to get behind him. And when I talk about, entrepreneurship as a performance art to me, I grew up loving the arts. I grew up playing classical violin. I grew up watching symphonies play, from the highest nosebleed seats possible, and being inspired through music. And when I think about entrepreneurship and the founder and the management team as being the conductor of this beautiful orchestra, everyone has to be playing off the same sheet of music. If the wind is off, if the bowing is off, if you're playing E flat when it's E sharp, nothing sounds right. And so this founder is this constant conductor of this beautiful thing. And the reason why I love calling entrepreneurship a performance art is because because performance and the art varies, which is why we get different results, just like in performance art.
Yeah.
Just like in the arts. So entrepreneurship to me is an art form. And when we think about bringing entrepreneurs back to some of the basics of, again, the 5 forces, how well do you know and preach this to the world? Because guess who's going to run your company? People are going to run your company.
Yeah.
And if you aren't talking to the world in an external way that represents the true you, you're going to recruit the wrong people into your organization. So when you tell me, Mr. or Mrs. Entrepreneur, that you don't have time to sit down and make these 5 forces, you're going to attract the wrong people.
Yep.
You're going to have a horrible retention.
Yeah.
People are going to be, your attrition will be horrible. And then you'll begin to grow a reputation of a CEO who can't keep the right people and culture.
Yeah.
Do you have time for it now?
Yeah.
Right? And we've even seen statistically that when you change the language of a job description and make things about culture and make things about community and offer things like working remotely with a team elsewhere, like giving them more power back to the employee, we notice that there's a 50% spike in applicants.
Wow.
People are searching differently for jobs these days.
Yeah.
They are. They want to be a part of something that is aligned where I can feel it inside of an interview, that when I hear about the vision of this company, I heard the exact same words being used from the founder and CEO to the hiring manager I talked with 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
They're all operating and being conducted off the same sheet of music.
Yeah. For a little while, I was venturing into the veteran hiring space, and I was trying to teach companies how to do it. And just like initially, like we really were desperate to do this. Okay, that's great. You've said those words. Does your computer highlight any veteran? Does every single veteran who applies, do they get a response? And do you have a veteran sitting on the other end in HR? I'm not saying they have to see and read every resume, but every person needs to have an outbound robotic response like, hey, you're a veteran. We respond to all of you. Send us back a message to Sergeant Bob.
Right.
Sergeant Bob's going to talk to you for sure. And if they don't respond, then good. They've self-selected out. But you have, and it's like, well, the one person I talked to, but they're like, but that's expensive. That's a whole new person. And I'm like, if you're serious about hiring veterans, you have to communicate with them. I got a rejection letter back for like a veteran liaison type position at Pacific Gas and Electric, the electric company in Northern California. And it said I failed to meet the standard for the position. And I'm like, you know what you just said to me? You just call me a shitbag. They don't know that because they don't have the military culture there to understand those words. And by the way, not a conversation. They just read a piece of paper that they probably didn't read. I probably just got the standard rejection. But that stuff makes people want to jump off the bridges.
That's right.
So if you're going to hire quality people, it's the same thing across the board. You don't just have a robot pick your things for you. Yes, sort of a little bit, but it has to be a human connection to truly get good people.
Right. And I've noticed that the companies that are paying attention to a human-centered design onboarding process are winning.
Yeah.
They're just winning. They're worth billions of dollars. The founders are being recognized all over the world. And they look at the world like the world is crazy because all they're doing is caring about people.
Yeah.
And one question that I love asking CEOs before we wrap up, but one question I love asking CEOs is, who do you work for?
Yeah. Yes.
And when I ask that question, I'm giving it away, but when I ask the question, it's interesting because immediately I'd say more than 70% of the responses are, the customer, 100%. Like we work tirelessly for our customer. Yeah. And I was like, okay, but who's working for your customer? Yeah. And then they'll come around and be like, oh, I see what you did there. Then they'll say, oh, well, the people that work for the company. And I said, well, then who do you work for? And he's like, I work for the people of this company. That's right. That's right. You don't work for your board. Yeah. You don't work for your customer. Nope. You work for your people. Yeah. And your people, if you are a good, great leader, they will then in turn take care of the customer, take care of the board, because the board cares about returns and share and stakeholders and all of those things. But like, if you take care of the people, everything else gets taken care of.
My uncle was a great man. His name was Grant Wynn. And when I was getting my master's degree in organizational management, the main thing he taught me, and the most important thing I learned in the whole master's degree, so pay attention if you're in a master's program, you should have one good thing. He ran a hospital, and he said, the thing I want you to learn is this: take any organizational chart and 180 it. Yeah. And if the person at the top and now at the bottom is uncomfortable there, wrong person.
Wrong person.
Because you have to be willing to say, and then that puts the board below you. That's right. And your job is to take all that stuff in and say, this is a CEO problem. Now I'm going to go to the people that provision the CEO. It's just like you make them division down below you. Yep. And you're like, I need these resources to get my job done because my good people are telling me that this is what they need. And if you don't handle it that way, you can do it other ways, of course. But that is a way that's much more people-centric. And the other thing I wanted to add in, too, is when we talk in terms of stakeholders, we often talk in a very dumb way, like, who's a stakeholder here? Well, Joe's a stakeholder because he's that. We need HR here. Yep, and I always think, okay, so school shootings, who's a stakeholder? The parents. If you're going to do a school shooting training, you should, as the chief of police, you should, as the principal, you should, as the fire chief, invite 1 or 2 or 6 parents to come along and observe training. Because guess who's the biggest stakeholder in this tent? You know, like it's those kids. That's right. And you have to have the parents. And if you don't communicate that with the parents, then there is no exercise. Yeah, you develop some operational capacity, but you've missed the forest for the trees.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's been a crazy journey last year learning all of this. And I'm proud to say that 1 year to the day, I left honor.org on February 12th of 2019. And on February 12th of 2020, we will be closing our fund, deploying capital, and getting into the weeds with some amazing companies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. So what's next then? Like, I mean, obviously you guys are going up and growing and getting bigger. What's out there?
Yeah. So for me, the big part of all of this TLC talk and the big part of all these 5 guiding forces is I'm gathering a coaching cadre made up of some of the greatest leaders the world has ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And these are coming from the special operations community. These are coming from professional athletic backgrounds and professional coaching. The group that I've pulled together to begin walking through how we're not just the economics of being a part of a venture fund, but I have to make sure that the qualifying question is answered correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And the first qualifying question that I ask all these people is, what do you know about venture capital? And there's only one answer that I will take, which is nothing.
Oh, I love it.
Nothing.
Yes.
I don't need them to know about venture capital.
Yeah.
Because it's a jaded experience. It's
Yeah.
like going in, I'm not knocking MBAs, but like
Yeah.
the best way to learn how to build a business is to build a business. And the best way to learn how to build great teams, how to be a great leader, and how to be a great steward of a culture is to go do all that.
Yeah.
And some of these people have been doing this for decades. I want them to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want them to be a VC.
Right.
I want them to be a part of a VC fund that focuses on TLC.
Yeah.
And that's it. So I'm building this coaching cadre that we're calling a venture coaching practice, because it's very much like medicine, right? Like, you still go get a surgery. The doctor that you go and see, he or she is practicing medicine.
Yeah.
Right? They haven't figured it out yet. They're still
Right.
practicing.
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't know everything there is to know about that.
Right.
Coaching is the same way. It's a practice.
Yeah.
Right? It's we don't know everything about coaching. It's a very qualitative practice.
Sure.
We just know that when coaches get involved, business goes through the roof.
Yeah.
So, and I have all the statistics from the Startup Human Genome Project, where they infuse these different type of coaches into startups early on. 70% more growth. They raise 7 times more capital, faster, sooner, and more. And the entrepreneurs' businesses last 10 times longer if there is a coaching element in the early stages of a startup.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do. Is I want to bring together a great pool of talent at the executive level, and I want to bring together a great talent. A coaching practice made up of the greatest leaders our generation has ever seen. And then I think that the results after Fund 1 and then Fund 2, they'll speak for themselves on the growth of our companies.
That's fantastic. Hey, man, thanks for sharing all that stuff today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.